I spent most of my life afraid of making the wrong decision. Well, not in a paralyzing way. I functioned, I decided, I moved forward, but there was always this low hum of anxiety underneath it. What if I missed something? What if more research would have changed the answer? What if the other choice was better? It took me decades to figure out what was actually going on. And once I did, something shifted. I'll tell you what, but you have to stay to the end. First, let me tell you about a car. I turned 60 and decided to stop being responsible. Well, not completely. I'm still an engineer at heart, but I spent 6 decades making decisions the right way, researching, analyzing, weighing every variable. And I was starting to wonder if all that careful thinking was actually getting in my way. I'd wanted a BMW my entire adult life, but every time the thought surfaced, my brain already had an answer. Too expensive, not practical, can't justify it. Sensible, responsible, also quietly miserable. When I finally walked in that dealership at 60, I told myself I was just going to take a look. Now, the salesman, of course, was persistent, and I told him what I always tell salesmen: I never make a decision on the spot. Never. I did put down a refundable deposit and I went home to think about it. 2 hours later, I called him back. I had found a black on black 330i. It was 1 year old with less than 8,000 miles. The engineer in me felt slightly better about that. It was used and it was low mileage. 5 years later, I can tell you I have not one regret about the decision I made in an afternoon. My gut had known the answer the whole time. I just needed 2 hours to let my brain catch up. I went into engineering because I believed every problem had a correct answer. Apply the right formula, gather enough data, and the right decision reveals itself. Even engineering runs on tolerances and probabilities. Nothing is as precise as we want it to be. And in the messier territories of real life, careers, relationships, grief, joy, the formula breaks down entirely. I've stood in grocery store aisles analyzing the cost per ounce of oatmeal for like minutes, looking at oatmeal, trying to save pennies, making sure I got the most oatmeal per dollar I spent. That's what happens when your brain insists on being in charge of everything. I was in sales, and sales taught me something that business school doesn't teach. People buy from people they like. You can have the best numbers in your analysis, every objection answered, the ROI buttoned down to three decimal places. But if the customer didn't want to buy from you, they'd find a way to throw the business to the other guy every time. I worked for IBM. We could build a case for our solution better than anyone, but we didn't always win. The inverse is just as true. When people like you, they'll find reasons to say yes, even when the case isn't airtight. Now, I learned this the hard way. I worked on one deal for over a year. The numbers were airtight. There was a clear ROI, obvious savings. On paper, it was a no brainer. But for over a year, I pushed this and they never bought. Why? I finally figured out it was because the solution would displace workers, and they weren't willing to do that to people. Now, that's not a bad decision, that's a deeply human one. But we think people make decisions with their intellect. They don't. They decide with their hearts, with their values, with their loyalties, with their gut. And then they use logic to justify it afterward. This is true in business. It's true in every significant choice you'll ever make. Now, here's a tool I use when I'm genuinely stuck between options: flip a coin, not to let the coin decide, but to feel what happens when it lands. Heads, does your stomach drop slightly? Well, that's information. Tails, does something loosen? Do you feel relief? That's also information. Your gut already knows what you want. The coin just makes the answer loud enough to hear. We tell ourselves, if I just had more data, I'd make a better decision. Oh, I know this so well. But research consistently shows the opposite. Too many options leads to paralysis. Or worse, you choose and then you spend the rest of the time wondering if you chose correctly. It's one of the reasons I hate Cheesecake Factory and I love In N Out. The menu at Cheesecake Factory annoys me to the point that I refuse to eat there. Too many options, they don't specialize in anything. I don't want to have anything to do with it. When I go to In N Out, which only has basically hamburgers, french fries, and drinks, I will never second guess my choice. The problem isn't that you don't have enough information. The problem is you don't trust what you already know. There's a reason the dinner conversation between couples goes in circles. Where do you want to eat? I don't know. Where do you want to eat? Try this. Tell your partner, I'm taking you somewhere for dinner. You'll never guess where. Then ask them to guess. Where they guess is actually where they want to go. Now, here's the thing about trusting your gut, it doesn't always point toward more. My first washing machine was the base model from Sears. I asked the guy who built my home to throw it in with the price of our custom home that he had built. I figured it was going to break in a couple of years because it was cheap. And then I'd do my research and I'd buy something better. After all, it was the cheapest one that Sears made. But you know what? 20 years later, that thing was still running. But I thought it was time to buy a new high efficiency fancy machine. I'd figured I'd earned the upgrade. So I did the research. Front loading, high efficiency, best consumer report score, all the bells and whistles. I made the smart, informed, responsible decision. That washing machine shook my entire first floor, no matter how I balanced it. It smelled. I would sit in my office and I could feel my desk shake whenever it ran the spin cycle. I was told to run more full loads and add clean towels just to bulk up the load. Put clean towels into the washing machine to bulk up the load. That made no sense to me. I went to Costco's website and I bought the next to the cheapest top loader they had. 5 years later, I've had zero problems. And that washing machine that gave me a lesson though that I carried forward. That high efficiency, super fancy washing machine. When my dishwasher needed replacing, I didn't spiral. I went to Costco, I bought the middle of the road model, and I was done with it. No research rabbit hole, no second guessing. The fancy machine had already taught me what I needed to know. More research, more options aren't necessarily better, especially on something so mundane as a washing machine. Make a decision, move on. Every decision teaches you something if you're willing to learn instead of just regret. Now, here's a decision I wrestled with for 6 months. The BMW was easy compared to this one. For 6 months, I've been running the numbers on when to start taking Social Security. The government incentivizes you to wait. Delay long enough, and a lifetime benefit difference can run into the tens of thousands of dollars. And my spreadsheets made a strong case for waiting. But spreadsheets can't calculate everything. What they couldn't tell me was what delaying would cost me in ways that don't show up in columns. Not taking it now means digging deeper into my retirement savings sooner. Not taking it now means no regular income hitting my account. And for someone who spent a lifetime in scarcity mentality, watching every dollar, always preparing for the worst, no regular income meant that old anxiety creeping back in. And I've been working hard to escape that mentality, to actually live now instead of hoarding for a future that isn't even promised. And I know better than most that the future isn't promised. So I finally listened to my heart. I decide to take it now when I can enjoy it, not to optimize for some future like when I'm 85 years old. Better living now over more money in a bank account that I might never spend. The numbers told one story, my gut told another, and I chose my gut. So here's the thing I promised you at the beginning I was going to tell you. Here's what I've learned: there are no wrong decisions, there's only the meaning that you give them. A decision is only wrong if you retroactively give it that meaning. I want you to think about that. The wrongness isn't in the decision itself, it's in the story you tell yourself afterward with the benefit of hindsight that you didn't have at the time. You base it on the outcome rather than the decision that you made. I now make every decision knowing it's the right decision. And it's the right decision because it's the decision I'm making with the information that I have in that moment. And that's all any of us can ever do. When I go out to dinner, I scan the menu, I find the first thing that appeals to me, I close the menu, and I stop looking. I don't wonder if something else would have been better. That chapter is closed. Decision made, it's the right one. Gathering more information is not the key to better decisions. Making a decision, committing to it, and releasing the need to grade it, that's the key. No looking back, no judging yesterday's choice with today's knowledge. The goal isn't certainty, it never was. The goal is to trust yourself enough to decide and then let it be enough. That's not recklessness, that's actually wisdom. And it only took me about 6 decades to get here. So, is there a decision you've been circling when your gut already knows the answer to that you're waiting to get right before you make it? What meaning have you been giving to decisions you made in the past that were actually just decisions? What decisions have you judged as being wrong, even though you couldn't possibly have known the outcome at the time you made them? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this resonated, share it with someone who's been overthinking something that they already know.